Good evening, you're tuning in to Awani Tonight with me, Farhana Sheikh. Malaysia aims to abolish the mandatory death penalty by early next year. And a national action plan on child labour is crucial to protect children from exploitation and abuse. That's coming up. The relevant legislative amendments to abolish mandatory death sentence is expected to be tabled in the October parliamentary sitting. De facto Law Minister Datuk Seri Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar said this would allow for mandatory death penalty to be abolished by January next year. Wan Junaidi said the government plans to gather public feedback before tabling the proposed amendments in Parliament. Wan Junaidi also said the government could not commute the sentences of those currently on death row as the law has yet to be amended. However, he added that the moratorium on executions implemented since 2018 would remain as long as the amendments were not yet finalized. He said that a tribunal will also be set up to study the cases of 1,342 convicts who are currently on death row in the country. Will MPs support the amendment of 11 law provisions to abolish mandatory death sentences, or will there be resistance to reform? Tonight on Consider This, we speak to our guests about potential obstacles to abolishing mandatory death penalties. The World Bank maintained Malaysia's economic growth forecast this year at 5.5%. After growing 3.1% last year on the back of eased pandemic restrictions and increased vaccination, the World Bank said the growth this time is driven by a rebound in consumption demand as economic activity picks up pace. The World Bank also projected Malaysia's economy to grow at 4.5% in 2023 and 4.4% in 2024. Malaysia's private consumption growth is also forecasted to reach 8.5% in 2022, its fastest pace since 2008. Headline inflation, however, is projected to increase but will remain relatively manageable at between 2.5% and 3.5% this year. The World Bank also assured that Malaysia would not be heavily impacted by the rising interest rates in the US compared to other East Asia and Pacific countries due to the nation's flexible exchange rate and large international reserves. The Goods and Services Tax (GST) is better than the Sales and Services Tax (SST) as it widens a country's tax base and brings in more revenue. World Bank Group lead economist Dr. Apurva Sanghi said more than 170 countries have adopted some form of GST system, proving its efficiency.
Now, the GST is indeed better than the current SST. More than 170 countries have around the world established some sort of a VAT GST regime. And there's a reason for that, because the GST is better in the sense that it is more efficient than the SST. And why? Because it's a tax on consumption. 60% of the economy depends on consumption. It's a tax base that widens tax. It is a tax that widens the tax base and brings in more revenue. In fact, in early analysis, we show that GST provides nearly twice as much tax revenue as the SST.
Dr. Apurva, however, said the GST system is not without its shortcomings. It may affect lower-income households that consume more than regular households if a regressive tax system based on consumption like GST were implemented. The Health Ministry has opened its medicine stocks to private healthcare facilities that are facing drug shortages. Health Minister Khairi Jamaluddin said private health facilities could request to borrow medicine supplies from the nearest public healthcare facility or from other private centres. In a statement, he said public healthcare facilities can oblige requests from private facilities to borrow drugs, as long as there is enough for the public facilities' own patients first. Khairi said if necessary, patients could be referred to the nearest government health facility to continue treatment. However, the patients may need to change the medication regimen based on the availability at the facility. He added that patients can also buy the medicines from community pharmacies with a prescription from private clinics or hospitals. Meanwhile, leaders from Pakatan Harapan are seeking an immediate meeting with Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob. This is to discuss the 4 institutional reforms that were part of their bipartisan cooperation ahead of next month's Dewan Rakyat seating.
In a statement, the PH lawmakers also expressed their disappointment with the PM for calling off a special parliamentary sitting to discuss the highly anticipated anti-party hopping bill. PH said with the passing of the anti-party hopping bill, 15 out of the 18-point memorandum of understanding signed between the opposition and the government last September have been met. The remaining 3 items are the 2-term limit for the Prime Minister's tenure, the Parliamentary Service Bill, and amendments to the Dewan Rakyat standing orders.
We'll go for a quick break. Stay with us.
COVID-19 memperlihatkan kepada kita betapa pantasnya adaptasi teknologi di kalangan PKS kita. Niaga Awani dan Unified Business akan menyelami perjalanan kebangkitan semula PKS kita melalui segmen Jiwa SME setiap Selasa dan Khamis untuk inspirasi anda.
Transformasikan perniagaan dengan Unified Business, rakan digital pilihan anda. Hubungi kami sekarang dan jimat sehingga 50%. Jom Unified Business.
Dream of becoming the next badminton champion? Join Astro Camp Badminton and train with top coaches in Malaysia. Open to girls and boys ages 10 to 12. Register online with your Astro account and attend any of our 5 selection camps throughout Malaysia. Those chosen will get to train with professional coaches in Kuala Lumpur. Register today on our website and watch it on Astro Arena.
Welcome back. Decline in household incomes have negatively impacted children, forcing many into the workforce earlier to assist in their family finances. Datuk Nur Aziah Muhammad Awal, Professor of Law in Family, Women and Children at UKM, says a national action plan on child labour is crucial to protect children from exploitation and abuse.
At the moment, we have a number of cases where it involves refugees' children, and we do know there are a lot of children in the plantations. Yeah. Now, if we do not have a proper national action plan, if we want to abolish or even to curb child labour in Malaysia, then it must be a proper national action plan for children, child labour. And secondly, the law must be looked into in such a way that children must be looked as they are children and they need to go to school. School must be first priority. And of course, at the Office of the Children Commissioner, when I was there, we wanted to make primary and secondary school compulsory and free. In that case, all children, if they are at school, then you would be able to avoid them being used as labor.
At the same time, children from lower income families must be given more support, especially those who have fallen behind in their studies after missing out on online classes for 2 years.
But I would like to see the budget in 2022 for 2023. There must be a specific budget for children. So in terms of children who comes from a very poor family, at least there are some money for them for food. And then they can go to school for free. They don't have to pay anything extra. And if the school and the house is a long way, there must be proper school bus or transportation for them. And if it's in KL, you can, of course, you get the 100 ringgit ticket for them to use for the whole month. But I think for this type of children, for school children, they should ride free. There must be some sort of effort to assist them so that they will not be pushed towards dropping out from school and then finding a job.
On to the international front, Beijing started a new round of mass testing in its most populous district after a rapidly spreading outbreak linked to a nightclub. A total of 166 cases have been linked to the premise after an infected person visited there. The outbreak threw the city's tentative reopening into chaos, leading authorities to shutter nightlife venues in the downtown district of Chaoyang days after they reopened. Chaoyang kicked off a 3-day mass testing campaign among its roughly 3.5 million residents. About 10,000 close contacts of the bar's patrons have been identified and their residential buildings put under lockdown, and some planned school reopenings in the district have been postponed. China is the last major economy still committed to a zero-COVID strategy, stamping out new cases with a combination of targeted lockdowns, mass testing and lengthy quarantines. South Korea is under mounting stress as truckers continue their nationwide strike for the 7th day. The government estimated the disruption have cost industries up to $1.2 billion in damages. A 22,000-strong trucker union is urging the government to provide a minimum wage in the face of soaring fuel prices that are squeezing their finances. The truckers are also demanding an extension of subsidies set to expire this year. 4 rounds of government negotiations have failed to secure a deal. The government says it is up to Parliament to change the legislation. South Korea's petrochemical shipments have plunged 90% as the trucker strike drags on. Automobile and steel makers have also cut operations due to inventory issues from transport disruptions. Amnesty International has accused Russia of war crimes in Ukraine. The rights body said Moscow used banned cluster bombs in the northeastern city of Kharkiv and carried out indiscriminate attacks, killing hundreds of civilians. Amnesty said it had uncovered proof in Kharkiv of the repeated use by Russian forces of cluster bombs and scatterable landmines, all of which are banned under international conventions. Cluster bombs release dozens of bomblets or grenades in mid-air, scattering them indiscriminately over hundreds of square meters. Over 600 civilians had been killed and more than 1,200 wounded in Kharkiv since the conflict began on February 24th. According to figures from the United Nations Refugee Agency, over 6 million refugees have fled Ukraine since. The Japanese yen fell to a 24-year low against the dollar on Monday, as the country's central bank continues to buck the global trend of rate hikes, while the rest of the world, led by the US Federal Reserve, is raising rates aggressively to tame soaring inflation. The Bank of Japan has doubled down on monetary easing, which it hopes will lead to stable growth.
The yen, the third most traded currency globally, fell past the psychological level of 135 against the dollar last seen in October 1998. US inflation in May hit a 4-decade high, rising 8.6%. In Japan, however, inflation has only just hit the central bank's long-term target of 2%. A weaker yen can both benefit and harm the economy, businesses and consumers. The steepness of its slide, however, has raised concerns about the central bank's policy and the possibility of government intervention in currency markets. The last time Japan intervened to support its currency was 1998, when the Asian financial crisis triggered rapid capital outflows from the region.
That's all we have for you on Awani tonight. I'm Farhana Sheikh. Thank you for watching.